All right, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all again for making time for this session. I've had the opportunity to meet with many of you, but for those of you who do not know me, my name is Timo Prieto, and I lead strategic channel enablement here at Aviatrix. Joining me today is Hari Ramsankaran, our Senior Partner Solutions Architect, as well as Ahmed Abir, our Technical Product Manager, and he's going to be giving you guys a little bit more of a granular peek into some of the latest innovations that we've brought into this 6.0 release. So we're gonna go ahead and get started, and a couple of quick bits of housekeeping. Right now, everyone's on mute as an attendee. If you have questions, you've got a couple of options. Please go ahead and raise your hand. We track that. And then if there's anything that you wanna ask a question directly about, please feel free to use the Q&A box. If it's something that we can address in flight, that'd be great. And if we end a little bit early, we'll try to make some time for some Q&A as well. And if not, we'll definitely follow up with you guys offline to make sure that we address all of your questions. So go ahead, and we're going to go ahead and dive right in. There's a couple of things that we really want to make sure that we make very clear as we go through this session. And if you guys can leave with just a few things really in your mind. Number one, it's having a great grasp of the technical innovations that we're bringing into 6.0. This is our sixth major software release that we're very excited about. And not only making sure that you're clear on what those innovations and new capabilities are, we want to make sure that you're clear on the technical outcomes that they drive for our customers. 6.0 was really fed by a lot of feedback from our enterprise clients. And we want to make sure that you guys have a clear understanding of what those technical capabilities are and how they're solving problems for our customers. Really critical there. Last, we really want to make sure that you're very clear on how to engage with us proactively as you go and meet with more of your customers and have these conversations. We're grateful that you've chosen Aviatrix to be one of those partners with you as you continue to add value and really guide your customers through this transition to public cloud networking. So we're going to go and dive right in. You guys really are your customers' trusted advisors, and you earn that role by helping them, really navigate some of the pitfalls and challenges of on-prem networking. But over time, and I'm sure many of you are seeing what we're seeing here today, which is that the center of gravity is really shifting from the data center to the public cloud. This shift requires a new reference architecture for enterprise networking. This is our mission as a company, and this is exactly what we're delivering in our 6.0 release. So to really hammer home the problem statement and some of the pain that our customers are having, and if we can go to the next slide, that'd be great. What we have seen through countless customer interactions really here is that the weak link in public clouds and all of the CSPs is that network fabric. There are critical gaps that are driving customers to us every day within those native constructs. And those are those gaps in security or performance or visibility and troubleshooting are where we are going to continue to innovate and lead the market as a company. So before I hand off to Hari here, I just want to zoom in on that transit fabric really quick. Transit, in our view of the world, really is the cornerstone of every customer's cloud network. That's what allows resource A to talk to resource B. And that's where all those CSP cloud native constructs really leave a lot more to be desired, particularly in the enterprise. This is where we are leading the market. This is where we are setting that reference architecture. And this is really where we're excited to partner with all of you and take this to your customers so that we can really drive those outcomes and that digital transformation together. So with that, I'm gonna hand off to Hari. Thank you all again for your time today. And again, please feel free to drop any questions that you have in that Q&A box.
All right, thank you so much, Timo. That was a really good introduction. And thank you again for everybody who's taken the time to join us here today. Like Timo mentioned, nobody else is more excited than us here at Aviatrix about 6.0. You may already know that Aviatrix is really well known for the multi-cloud network architecture. It's an architecture that's come through experience, having worked with 400 plus customers. It's very prescriptive, time-tested. And to Timo's earlier point, we realized there's a lot of gaps that needed to be bridged when the center of gravity shifted to the cloud. And so this architecture enables you to do that. Specifically in 6.0, we've released a lot of new features that goes way beyond what basic transit networking can do for you and your customers that's provided by cloud service providers, right? Um, we've mentioned this time and again, architecture is really where you want to start in when you build cloud networking. And if you were to build your house, you wouldn't start without a foundation, without having it drawn out in paper, making sure it has all the redundancies that you need. And similar concept, you want to start building your cloud network with the architecture there, right? And the first piece that's very key to that architecture is that common core, which consists of the transit and the application layer, right? I'm sure most of you have seen our MCNA diagrams, and we pride ourselves in that common core transit being repeatable architecture across clouds, across regions. And this is Release 6.0 is just taking that a step further, right? So some of the main highlights in this release are a brand new UI, and Ahmed will show you and talk about that and what some of the new features are there. More importantly, we have released this global segmentation feature, which enables you to segment your customers' traffic, not only within the cloud, even if it's coming from on-prem via Direct Connect or Express Route or a site to cloud. And what's really neat about this is the segments can be extended across clouds. Again, it's a multi-cloud concept, and not just multi-cloud, but multi-region within the same cloud provider, multi-subscriptions or multi-accounts. So we have leveraged the segmentation and enabled that across the same multi-account subscription that's available to you via Aviatrix. And then from a security standpoint, this is a very important use case and very sought after from a lot of our customers and partners. We've enhanced that with dual transit FireNet, and we'll go into those details as we go into the detailed slides about what that feature does. And we've included many enhancements, including health checks, and also being able to exclude firewall certain sites from being inspected. This was a very common request, and now we have that ability to do that in 6.0. And with ActiveMesh 2.0, we've really taken our path selection algorithm to a next level. This enables you and your customers to do very granular route control, right? And having more control to send traffic over certain paths versus other. And we'll see how we leverage BGP ASPath metric, and other knobs, if you will, to be able to traffic engineer the routes in the cloud as well. And then there's additional features that ties to it, like the ACMP toggle, but also, we've taken ActiveMesh and developed it across multi-region with GCP, multi-AZ as the AZs grow in Azure. So ActiveMesh 2.0 has really become the standard now with 6.0. If you deploy a new controller and gateway in 6.0, it's turned on by default. And a couple of other things, network correctness. This is very important to any customer that we've spoken to. The ability to be able to do things like auditing and checking, overlapping IP checking, all of that functionalities are available to you, and we made enhancements to that in 6.0, specifically around overlapping IP support. There's some really cool features that's come out that I'm going to walk us through that. And finally, not the least, right? It's all know control and visibility is two things. As the migration happened to cloud, that customers lost. And so we're in that business of handing back that control and visibility. So this is something that's very important to us. Infrastructure as a code. We're fully Terraform capable. We're a Terraform partner. We're a Terraform provider. And what's neat is you can use that provider to deploy your workloads across clouds, same provider, same resources, same modules. And then we've made enhancements to Copilot, Flight Path, and several UI enhancements, and Ahmed could probably talk through this. We really organized things to make it even more visible for our customers. So with that, I will pause and pass it off to Ahmed, who will walk us through some of the details of the 6.0 release.
Thanks, Hari. Good morning, everyone. So as Hari mentioned, I will talk about all the features in detail, what we have introduced in 6.0. So the first thing, when you install 6.0 controller, you will notice we have a brand new user interface. It is much more cleaner, well organized, and now you have way more capabilities for your day-to operations and for troubleshooting. If you see our slide on the top left, you can see our dashboard, which can provide the summary of your devices, which can provide all the summary of your networks. On your right side, you can see a flight path uh, diagram where basically you can see which can help you troubleshoot all your control plane problems. On the bottom left, you can see transit and spoke list screen, which basically helps you see your routing tables for all your forwarding table as well. On your right, top right, you can see a segmentation. This is a brand new feature we have introduced in 6.0. So let's talk about the segmentation, what we have introduced and what is the use case for segmentation is. So let's understand the use case for segmentation first. So if you're designing the cloud network architecture, you may know like we have different kinds of workload in there, and we have different kinds of environment. We have the production environment, we have the development environment, we have the test environment. If you have a company, you have different kind of business units. So you need some kind of isolation, some privacy, some kind of segmentation. And it is very difficult to achieve with the native solution. The reason is you have to configure the security group without the control plane, and everything has to be done manually. So to address this problem, Aviatrix has bring the policy-based network segmentation, which is global, consistent, and repeatable. And it is not only limited to single cloud or single region. It can go to multiple regions, multiple cloud, all the way to your edge access segmentation, to your on-prem data centers, branches, and your cloud peering. So if you look at the slide here, we have three different kind of segment that slide. We have blue segment, we have a green segment, and a purple segment. Blue segment is basically spread it all over different clouds, and only blue devices can talk to the blue segment. Green segment is limited to the AWS different regions, and green devices can only talk to the green segment. Similarly, purple is isolated from blue and green. But if you have a use case where you would like to leak route between blue and green, you can leak route using our security policies. So we have a lot of flexibility here. So next, we would like to talk about, we have also enhanced some of the features in service insertion and service chaining. We have this feature earlier. We have done significant enhancement in 6.0. Before I go there, I would like to highlight some of the limitation and restriction we have in our native cloud solution. So let's start with the AWS one. For example, you are inserting a firewall. You're designing a firewall network with using AWS VPN model, then you basically you reduce your throughput to 600 Mbps. The reason is you have to use your IPsec, BGP, and SNet. That will reduce your throughput. Also, you will compromise your visibility because SNet will change your source IP and you cannot have end-to-end visibility. Similarly, in Azure, you also have their own challenges. You will have the long failover and inconsistent failover for the single AZ HA environment. And both cloud, you will notice you have to manage everything manually. You have to manage your routing tables, security groups, everything manually. But if you use our Aviatrix solution, in that case, you will get best of everything. You can use different firewall vendors. We have support Checkpoint, Fortinet, and Palo Alto, and you can do all kind of inspection. You can do east-west, VPC, VNet to VNet. You can do north-south. You can do egress, ingress, and you will get the performance up to 70 Gbps without any compromise. You don't need SNet, BGP, or IPsec, and everything will be active. So you can fully utilize your firewall. On top of it, because we have a very close integration with those vendors, you can deploy the firewall, you can manage the firewall, and you can propagate all the routes in the firewall and the gateway directly from our Aviatrix controller. So you don't have to configure anything manually. Everything is automated directly from our controller. With that, we've also introduced we have significantly improved our convergence time and the failover detection time. We used to detect check the health check for the firewall using our controller earlier before 6.0. What we are doing in the 6.0 is we have introduced the LAN interface and now checking the health of the firewall directly from our gateway, which is attached to the firewall. So we have significantly improved the convergence. Now it is less than 10 seconds. We also introduced the dual transit FireNet solution, as Hari mentioned. There's a use case is customer do not want to merge all the traffic or clutter the network with all different kinds of traffic with the internet and for cloud. So what they're doing is they are trying to separate two different kind of traffic. They are using one firewall only for your internet egress and ingress, and they're using for all the cloud network for your east-west traffic, for your north-south traffic, they are using a separate firewall. So now we have this capability to do it using the dual transit FireNet feature. Last but not least, I also would like to highlight we have introduced the exclude CEDAR feature. This is very useful. Let's suppose you have some services and you have very complex rules and policies configured on your firewall. You don't want to block some of the services. For example, some of the customers are using our controller to be part of that. We don't want our controller to be inspected. We want our controller to be reached to our gateways and other components of the architecture all the time, and we do not block it accidentally.
Yeah, that's a great recap, guys. And it's Timo chiming in here really quick again. Many of you guys from our partner community on this call are in a hybrid sales and technical role. And one thing that I just want to highlight here, if you can direct your attention up to seeing, some of these integrations that we have with Palo Alto and FortiGate and Fortinet rather, and Checkpoint and other partners, what we're seeing across the board in multiple territories and what I've seen firsthand in direct customer engagements is that when you are taking this service insertion and this transit fabric into your customers and having these conversations, if you're not the incumbent partner for one of these OEMs, you put yourself in the middle of a very strategic conversation and create a lot of drag for yourself and for your company as well. So I want to kind of keep you guys thinking about how this is not just adding technical value, but how you can also expand your business footprint within your accounts here as well.
Thank you, Timo. So another feature we have introduced is the active match 2.0. Before I go there, what we have done in active 2.0 compared to 1.0, you have to understand the use case first. So active match basically brings the network resiliency and the higher performance in your network. And in active match, 1.0 was only applicable to your transit FireNet, but in 2.0, what we have done is by default, it is enabled on your transit gateway and your spoke gateway as well. And in 2.0 now we have a capability to do the traffic engineering, and we can also do the deterministic next hop selection based on path selection algorithm. Let's before we talk about the path selection algorithm, you need to first understand how we treat different routes in our gateways. So if you have a route VPC attached to TGW, if you have the spoke gateway attached to your transit gateway, if you have a static route, we treat all those kind of routes local routes, and that is the highest preference we have. Other routes we are learning from your on-prem or from your transit peering. For example, if you have the BGP routes from your on-prem, you have the direct connect gateway from your on-prem, right? If you have the transit peering connecting your other clouds or other regions, we are treating all those routes regular routes, and that's where our path selection algorithm apply. So as you can see here in the route selection algorithm, the first preference is the local one. If you have the regular route, then we look at the AS path length. We prefer the AS path length. If you have more than one route available, with the same AS path length, then we'll go with the lowest metric. If you have a route which has same AS AS path length and you have same metric, in that case, you have two options. You can either enable the ECMP and you can distribute the load across all the links available, or you can disable the ECMP and you can pick the best route available based on your lower integer IP next hop. So, and we are not only stopping there. As I mentioned here, active mesh is not only for your cloud, it's also go all across your on-prem. For example, so you can see here, we have a single button to toggle your ECMP. You can, there's a box here, red box, which basically showing BGP ECMP, enable or disabled. What is the use case here? Let's suppose you have some on-prem connectivity with our transit. If you want to distribute the load across all the links, you can enable the ECMP. But there are some use cases where you do not want to enable the ECMP. For example, you have a fine net at on-prem. You want to have a symmetry. You don't want to enable this feature at this moment. Similarly, but from your spoke to transit, it's always ECMP. So, and as you guys know, right, we support different kinds of cloud in Aviatrix, right? And Aviatrix understand the GCP native construct very well. In GCP, we have a different concept. We have the concept of global VPCs and global routing. So what active mesh Aviatrix's gateways are doing, you can now use our transit gateways and spoke gateways across the region. So if you look at the slide here, we are showing GCP project 1 and project 2. In both of them, you can see we are using a same transit in both regions and same spoke VPCs in both regions. So now we have this capability, and similar capabilities we have in our Azure as well. So we have done similar capability bring to the Azure one. Now you can see, even if you have zone A and zone B, and if you want to extend the transit gateway and spoke gateway across the zone, now you have this capability in 6.0 to do it. And of course, we also support the HA in Azure and GCP as well. Last, one more site to cloud feature. Basically, we have done significant enhancement in this one, and you will love it. We have introduced the route approval concept. What do I mean by route approval? You have to understand this concept first. So we have seen this thing in the network multiple times. Customer have made the mistake and they basically went to the outage. Let's suppose you're learning some of the routes from your on-prem, from your data center or from your branches. And if it is a summary route or is the default route, if you install blindly, you may basically lose the reachability to your network. In that case, what we are doing is now you have the CEDAR approval or the route approval option within our controller. What it will do, it will learn the route, send it to the admin will approve it. And then once it is approved, then our gateway will propagate the route to all the other transits. So this is a very important route. If you want to install the routes and you want to make sure those routes are not conflicting with your existing default routes or summary routes, that is the best option to do it. We have also introduced the overlapping solution. Like if you have the use case, for example, if you have on-prem or if you have multiple customers where you do not have any control over it and they have the overlapping CEDAR. So the traditional solution is what you will do, basically you have to perform the net on-prem or you have to do the manual translation using SNet or DNet, but it is very complicated if you have hundreds or thousands of sites. It is very painful. So what we have done is basically we have introduced a feature called route-based IPsec using the VTI, virtual tunnel interface. That will allow you guys, you don't have to do anything. Everything will be done on our gateway and we perform the net map for you. So it will simplify your operations seamlessly. You just have to provide the virtual CEDAR and all the magic will be done in our Aviatrix gateway. We also have the feature for the correct routes propagation. So just to check if any errors or something is wrong, we have a check and we make sure before we propagate the route, we check the errors and the route subnets and other things. Hari, at this point, I will hand over to Ari and Ari can take you from there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emma. That was a really good, quick deep dive into some of the major feature sets. I just want to go back to that and kind of re-highlight those features that we talked about, right? The idea here is that you have the multi-cloud network architecture to start with, and start with the multi-cloud transit. You want to make sure that you create those repeatable modules that you can take and copy paste, if you will, into other clouds regions, and do it with Aviatrix so you get this global network segmentation feature that's really key, right? Being able to segment traffic across clouds, across regions, across accounts, subscriptions. No one can do that today, so it's really critical that you kind of take advantage of that with the help of Aviatrix. Dual transit FireNet, like Ahmed mentioned, it's I can't tell you how many times I've heard from customers that they don't want to put for compliance reasons their FireNet internet ingress egress in the same firewall that they use for inspecting, logging all of their local traffic, if you will, that's east to west or to on-prem, right? And even being able to exclude CIDRs, that's really powerful. You reduce latency issues with things like our controller being able to talk to the gateways with that feature, just to give you an example. And Ahmed walked us through really nicely the path selection algorithm, how it works. I'm sure there might be questions on that, and we're happy to tackle that either today or later on. And we've added so many new features around network correctness and also, visibility. So let me go to that and quickly talk about some of the enhancements that we've done to Copilot. As most of you are aware, I'm hoping, Copilot is another flagship product from us. It's not a separate product. It's the same product that's part of the same platform. You spin it up as a separate instance or a VM, and you have it talk directly to the controller, and you're done, really. And you enable it to things like to be able to do things like NetFlow, and the gateways, because they're in that NOR data plane, they stream NetFlow data to Copilot, and you can look at flow level details over time, over geolocations. You can even look at every single NetFlow headers, and you're able to do even layer 4 troubleshooting right out of Copilot, right? You can right click on any one of these gateways and you can run pings, trace routes, and other diag information. Some of the new features that we've included are things like latency checks. So you can see in this diagram that it's showing latency between two clouds, right? That's really good information that you can use to kind of look into any application slowness and things like that, right? And you can do this right out of Copilot's topology map. You click on it and you just run latency monitors. It kicks off an API call to a controller, which does the magic in the back end and reports back to Copilot, and you end up getting this information on the Copilot diagram itself. And we also understand that as enterprises start deploying Copilot and looking at all of this information, they typically have hundreds of VPCs or more, and multiple different subscriptions and accounts, also in the hundreds range. It gets really messy to manage, so we have things like clustering feature that's enabled now. You can click on the VNet and cluster them together and look at specific portions of your network, maybe a specific subscription, maybe a specific account, maybe a specific region, or maybe a specific flow. Right, and you're able to cluster and uncluster that and look at all those details. So Copilot has that new feature as well. And the other key Copilot feature that I'm not sure if you guys have heard of, and I want to make sure you know, is the tagging functionality. This is global tagging. A lot of cloud service providers do have tagging functionalities you can use to automate things and also look at specific information. Imagine being able to do that across clouds and accounts and subscriptions, all that shared model concept, right? And still maintain that multi-tenancy. You can tag workflows between any two endpoints in Copilot, whether it's in different clouds or same cloud, different regions, doesn't matter. And you can go search for that tag and it'll highlight that specific section, and you can kind of start troubleshooting. So for example, you have an Apache server and client that's having issues. You have it tagged as Apache client here to Apache server here. You can look at that specific segment and start doing some layer 3 troubleshooting and then layer 4 troubleshooting. And at least, you know, you can go back and say, well, you may want this to be a network layer issue, but it's not. You know, so very quickly you can identify that with that global tagging feature. You can focus on things and get resolved. We pride ourselves in being a Terraform partner. I mentioned this earlier, and I'm sure most of you know this. And I know some of the partners here today are also Terraform partners, and really pride yourself in being able to deploy your infrastructure, even day 2 with Terraform. And so you can do that with our Aviatrix provider. If you haven't tried it, please go to our website, and there's a bunch of different solutions that we have now that you can automatically deploy, like deploying the controller, deploying the MCNA transit, deploying even FileNet using Terraform. The neat thing is it's the same provider across any cloud, right? So you use the same provider to deploy the exact same module in one cloud, and you repeat that across clouds. Very powerful, makes it easier to fit into the CI/CD pipelines of your customers, and repeatable, right? So before I go in here, I just wanted to mention that as new features come out with 6.0 and 6.1, in the control of the Terraform provider keeps up with that as well. So a lot of the features you see here will also be included into a Terraform provider. Okay, I don't see any questions or anything like that, so I'll keep moving forward. We promised to talk about 6.0. Those are some of the major highlights, and Ahmed walked us through some of those details. The other piece of this was to talk through some reference architecture models, right? We mentioned this earlier. We have time-tested architectures having deployed in multiple customer environments with dynamic requirements. And so we wanted to put in front of you a few of those architectures we've seen and how you can deploy that with the Aviatrix technology platform. So let's dive straight in. I've organized this in the form of a case study. Let's assume this is a healthcare provider that has these new public cloud networking requirements. What you may already, some of you might connect to this is typically some customers, you know, especially if they're not from a networking or security background, more on the developing side, or you know, some of the business application side, might not understand the need and the requirement of transitive architecture, right? So as architects, as solution architects, it's our role to point that, hey, in order for you to be able to do this, in order for traffic from on-prem to go to your spoke, multiple spokes, you need something like a transit architecture. Otherwise, you're looking at creating separate tunnels to each one of those spokes, right? Things like that. So understanding that, so this might not pop out right away from your conversations with your customer, but what you need to remember is that start with that transitive architecture, and then you can build on top of that with things like multi-region failover and HA, fault tolerance. Any enterprise that is serious about the workloads they're putting into the public cloud, which we started noticing based on the center of gravity shift that Timo mentioned earlier, right? They care about the workloads, and so they care about failovers. They care about uptimes, recovery times, right? So, you know, we will see how this architecture addresses multi-region level failover and HA. And then compliance requirements for encryption of data in motion, meaning when your data is going from on-prem to the cloud, you might think it's completely secure, but it might be going through multiple different providers, data centers, before it gets to your cloud provider, right? So encrypting the data in motion is important, and managing, you know, security from ingress, egress to the internet, even sometimes between business units are some compliance requirements that's very important, right? And then things like third-party access, vendor access, managing overlap IP spaces, segmenting. We'll talk about segmentation. That's a big requirement these days. And segmenting your, and not subjecting your workloads to the same failure or security vulnerabilities as your third parties and vendors is also critical. So you want to be able to segment that. Providing user access, and we saw this inserting firewalls into your cloud is not simple. We work with customers that have spent months a month or so trying to insert firewalls and having it functional. You can do that in under a day with us, and managing all of those different workflows. We'll look at these in the next slides. Visibility troubleshooting is a requirement for most of them. It goes to the control and the visibility that we talk about. Automation and segmentation, right? I talked about segmenting your third-party connections separately. Sometimes you want to segment traffic coming from on-prem, giving it access only to certain points in your cloud network. So things like that, from a segmentation standpoint, becomes really important. So if you haven't seen our MC for some reason, this is how it looks. I'll have a slide in the end how this maps to this case study and this architecture. And this kind of shows how these different requirements would map to all these different levels, right? So, security kind of goes across the application, transit, and access layers. Operations goes across that as well. And, the key here is your customers should go in with an architecture that enables them to plan for different technologies and different failure HA requirements in different layers of this architecture, right? Tomorrow, their requirement to access the cloud might shift from just a site-to-site VPN to an express route or a direct connect. Common scenario, right? Tomorrow, or like during this, work from home situation that most of us are in now, the need to go via OpenVPN or client VPNs have increased. Those things should not affect how you create your application layer, the VPCs, VNets, right? You should be able to plug them into this transit layer and not worry about your application layer. So, and then addressing all of these requirements across this architecture, we'll look at and see how that applies, including global segmentation.
Yeah, and really quick, Hari, right before you move on into the case study itself, I just wanted to go back to something you said on the previous slide, and this is perfect to highlight the point. This represents the the cumulative feedback that we've gotten from over 500 customer engagements. And Hari, you made the point a minute ago that while your customers might not understand or be able to articulate or communicate that I need inline firewalling and this is my exact problem, they're grappling with the problem statement, and it's us over time mapping with these customers and helping them solve it that has helped us to kind of codify these challenges into an architecture and into an engagement framework that becomes highly consultative. So we'll cover this here at the end of the call, but this is one of the things that I really want to impress with everybody on the call, which is you with your partnership with Aviatrix, you have something incredibly powerful to go and be that thought leader within your account, which is critical to continue to add value there. Most customers don't even know that this is the challenge that they're having and can't put it this succinctly. And part of that is the skills gap within cloud networking on the whole. So you're in this fantastic position now, with this partnership with Aviatrix to provide that thought leadership, help them fill that skills gap, and help them condense the problem statement of cloud networking into those 10 points that are actually on the next slide. So I can't underscore that enough. And if there's anything that we can help you to actually take this story into your customers, that's exactly what Hari and I are here to help you do.
Great points. We really want to, Timo, thank you. We really want to partner with you guys in communicating this message to our customers. So let's talk about the architecture that we built. This is kind of the end state, if you will, of mapping all of those requirements to the MCNA architecture. And quickly, you can grab a couple of things out of this, which is you see that transit spoke model. So you've established the transit layer, and you establish a similar transit layer across regions. You pair them together for that multi-region. You have direct connect connections. And you have third party. I mentioned this could be a hospital provider. They will have retail clinics that will need access into the cloud. And we will also look at some very detailed, information on how we achieve some of the HA and how we achieve some of the segmentation and things like that, right? So let's dive into that. So they were multi-region, that was a main requirement, and they have multiple different hosted applications in the cloud that the third parties and themselves need access to. Let's say they have some kind of EMR, EHR data that's hosted on-prem for reliability reasons, and they want to make sure that the clinics or even their workloads in the cloud are able to reach and register with that information into their databases on-prem. So it's very critical for them to have access to cloud-hosted applications and data center-hosted applications across regions and including third-party connections, right? So this is kind of how, in the end, the customer's architecture was built. Let's start looking at each one of those modules, if you will, right? So it starts with the transit network. We call it global because it's across regions or clouds. It really is that fundamental backbone for your infrastructure, right? The networking security is your infrastructure. The backbone of that is your transit network. And so this is where you start. You basically build that transit VPC, you spin up your Aviatrix transit gateways there, and then you do similar things in the spokes wherever you need access, spin up those gateways, and you establish that with one click, you establish that connection. We are all about providing access only as needed. So by default, we don't enable spoke-to-spoke connectivity. But when you enable things like Transit FireNet, where you want inline inspection for your spoke-to-spoke, we automatically enable that communication. By default, the spokes can talk to on-prem, so you get that transitive functionality, right? And then inserting those firewalls, right? Ahmed walked us through some of those severe limitations when you try to do this natively with cloud service providers. And so reiterating some of those, right? At the end, customers want active-active, and they want to be able to scale the full extent of their firewalls, so they're not spinning up more firewalls and paying more just because they can't scale. And so, providing them that scale-out function at line rate and having, that tight integration where the controller is not only programming the transit gateways and spoke gateways, it's also programming those firewall instances for you and managing the routing for that. So as end users, you're just worried about, and your customers are just worried about creating the policies in the firewalls and the inspection and logging and things like that. And they're not worried about routing or any of that stuff, right? The controller also goes and programs your different spoke VPC route tables and propagates all of that so that traffic is sent to your firewalls if you need that inspection and not if you don't, right? So the controller has that intelligence and provides that to you and enables that inspection. In our deployment, you can actually scale out up to 20 instances in AWS, for example. And in Azure, we're coming up with features where you can scale out more as well. So scale out options are available to you. So the key thing when it comes to firewall network is those workflows, right? Whether it's coming from on-prem going to your spoke, vice versa, or spoke to spoke because of business unit reasons or other reasons, test, dev, prod, whatever. or internet ingress egress, right? It's not shown here, but Emma talked about dual transit FireNet in detail. You can imagine another pair of transit VPC with firewalls, and the spokes are connected to that, and you can enable egress only on that, and that will become your internet firewalls, if you will. So that's very easily possible in this architecture. Okay, let's say you've established that transit network with firewalling, then you go into connecting all your third parties, right? So I mentioned this is a health provider, and they have medical records on-prem. Typically, they're not in the format that they want it to be, so they're also working with third parties like an ETL vendor. That's going to transform that data into the format that you want. So you need them to connect into your network. First thing that jumps out is that you don't want to, expose yourself to their security vulnerabilities. So what you do is you put them in a separate DMZ security domain, right? And then you manage, with policies on your firewalls, and also with segmentation. You allow them to only talk to certain segments. You also make sure that that gets inspected first by your firewalls, your cloud infrastructure firewalls, before it goes anywhere else, right? And so that power exists in this architecture. And typically, you don't have control over, your customers don't have control over what IP addressing scheme those third parties use, whether it's even your own retail clinics or those third parties that you're working with. So being able to do the NATing functionality, source NAT, destination NAT, depending on the traffic origination, all that can be done with the Aviatrix spoke gateways, and and we are constantly innovating. We're gonna that aisle mapping feature is very important and very interesting. It makes it very easy to achieve that, overcome, if you will, that overlapping issues, and so that fits into this architecture as well. Then HA is something that's critical, right? We talked about this. Here's where things like Active Mesh 2.0 comes in really handy. Even before 2.0, and I've done this personally in customer deployments, our controller did have that intelligence to choose the local route over the multi-region route. That already existed. Clearly with 2.0 that Ahmed walked us through, what we get is you get control, your customers get control. They can do things like AS path pre-trending. They can increase the metrics and prefer one region over the other for reasons that their business dictates, right? And so having that control across multi-regions now gives you that failover benefits, right? And you want to have that, fully redundant and encrypted connections. So Active Mesh enables that as well. These are tunnels, although it's not very apparent in this diagram, these are tunnels between both pair of transit gateways in both regions. So you're looking at that full mesh connection between your transit gateways. So it's very robust, and it's encrypted as well. So you get that high performance encryption with it that we may have mentioned earlier. So encrypted, redundant, multi-region connectivity, right? Taking HA one step further, we talked about a data plane HA. There are other things from an HA standpoint that customers care about. What if an instance fails, right? Well, we cover that by having a couple of instances in each of your VPCs that provide all this transit functionality. What if an AZ fails? Well, our recommendation is to make sure you deploy the second instance in a separate AZ that's fully supported, as you saw in the slides that Ahmed walked us through. Even in Azure, as availability zones are increasing more than availability sets, we've started supporting that. In GCP, we can do on a regional basis, right, which is pretty powerful for GCP customers. So you get that AZ failover as well for your data plane, right? Typically, regions don't fail, but for reasons that business dictates, you might want to prefer one region over another during maintenance, things like that. That's all supported. Or your connection into a region can fail, that direct connect can fail, that site to cloud tunnel can fail, right? So having this set up, quickly being able to fail over, all that is powerful for your data plane HA. All right. All of this intelligent architecture with those route checking, auditing, those HA, the overlapping stuff, and being able to insert all those firewalls easily, all that intelligence comes from this global control plane, which is your Aviatrix controller, right? What's really nice about the controller is we've abstracted that complexity of the cloud native constructs, right? We looked at it this very first slide today, the gap. You are presented with a virtual data center in the cloud to you, right? And you're presented with native constructs and not that router that you're typically used to. So the controller instead learns and understands the native constructs. It talks several different languages, over 18, 20 languages, depending on the cloud service provider, right? Whether it's IAM policies, SQS mechanisms, we understand all of that, and different VPCs, programming those route tables, etc. Even like TGW orchestration, AWS TGW orchestration, we speak all that language, right? So the controller speaks all that language and enables you to push all of these data plane, functionalities onto your application. We talked about data plane HA, so there are similar questions about, well, what about the control plane, right? First off, this should be apparent now, there is that control plane data plane separation. A lot of vendors don't provide that. We do. And with that separation, if your controller fails, right, this is your intelligent control plane, centralized management plane. What if it fails? Well, it does not affect your data plane. Traffic will continue to work. You just can make changes, right? And in AWS, we do enable you to do HA for the controller. All it does is it has a Lambda script that checks the instance health. Something happens, has an auto scale group of 1, and so it spins up another instance automatically. And then it goes and restores database from the S3 bucket that you've already backed up all your controller information into. So as you deploy your customers' environments, please make sure that you enable that backup, right? And multi-backup is recommended. So we'll just grab that database from there, and then we'll deploy the new controller with that database. We'll migrate the EIP, and you're all set. At the end of the day, the data plane does not even know that something went down. Within about 4 to 5 minutes, you've recovered your control plane, and you can continue on, right? So that HA is available. And Copilot, I mentioned this earlier, it's not a separate product. It talks directly to your controller, and it pulls all that information from the controller. You set up logging from the controller pointing to the Copilot, then the gateways themselves send all that data to Copilot, right? So part of that control plane, part of that intelligence is Copilot. That's part of the same platform as well. And one last point, we've taken, we've all mentioned how sticky some of these firewall insertion use cases are. Well, it's not just about firewall insertion, it's about any service insertion. Here I show an example of one of the vendors doing SSL orchestration. By that I mean, if you want your traffic to first be decrypted and you want to inspect to see what end users are doing, you can insert in those vendor products, and we will connect with those vendor products as opposed to the firewalls directly. And the traffic will then be decrypted, sent to the firewalls, and you can look at it and then come back to the vendor, and they will encrypt it again and send it to the destination, right? So you can imagine these kind of service insertion that is now possible with this architecture, right? It's not just firewalling. You can do any number of service insertions. There's a bunch of different use cases we've started to see in our customers, and I'm sure you will start seeing as well in the customers you work with. Talk to us if you have questions about how you can insert a different service and take advantage of all those, the active functionalities and things like that. No SNAT for east, west, north, south that we provide, and you want to still take advantage of all of those functionalities but with different services. we are able to do that. And bringing it all together, we talked about the MCNA. So this is how that architecture fits into the MCNA in this particular case study. It's a combination of a whole lot of different architectures that's put together to achieve the end goal. Your customer may not have all of these as requirements. They might say, oh, well, I don't have any overlapping aggregators. I don't care about that. Well, you still care about transit. Well, you still care about inline inspection. You still care about encryption over direct connect or express route. There's always something. So there are different pieces of this that you can pick and choose and deploy and achieve the end result, right? Other considerations, obviously multi-cloud, we can do that. I said this earlier, our controller talks a whole lot of different languages to Azure, GCP, OCI, so you can repeat those in those clouds. You know, they're connecting things like to SaaS providers, easily possible. We are able to do FQD and filtering on our gateways, which a lot of cloud service providers natively lack, so we can support that as well. So just know that the architecture is fully thought through based on, like, you know, time-tested deployments that we've done. All right, with that, I'm done, and I want to hand it back to Timo so he can close this out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Hari, and great job. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in for this call. I see that virtually every one of the participants has stayed on the entire time, so I hope you guys got some value out of this. I want to direct your attention to the left column over here. Please do me a favor and do two things, if nothing else, at the end of this call. Number one, take down that strategic_partners email at aviatrix.com. That's going to route directly to both myself and Hariram. And if you have questions, follow-up, comments, you can direct it straight to that box. We can get right on it. And if there's an opportunity that we can help you route to our field teams with, you know, to cover, we can do that through that link as well. And then also, please grab and bookmark community.aviatrix.com category partners. That is our new partner portal. We're going to be using that as our single source repository for more sales information, sales collateral, further technical training as well. So it's going to be a great resource for all of the field sellers, both technical and sales. And spoiler alert, that's also where our deal registration link is. So very good to keep that handy. Many of you are already a part of that portal. If you are not, email strategic partners and we can provision you access, because the partner portal is actually invite only, but Hari and I can get you access right away. With that, if there's any other questions, drop them in the Q&A, send them to that email, and I want to thank you guys all again for your time today.